All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're zooming way, way in, past the skin, past the tissues, to the most fundamental component of you, me, and every living thing on this planet. We're talking about the cell. It's a microscopic architect, a tiny engine, and the absolute blueprint of life itself. So let's get started. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics of what a cell is and a big idea that put it at the center of biology. Then we'll take a tour of its internal architecture, see how it runs like a busy factory, and check out the amazing variety of cells out there. And finally, we'll tie it all together to see why this tiny unit is the key to, well, pretty much everything in biology. You know, our whole story kicks off way back in 1665. A scientist, Robert Hooke, is looking at a super thin slice of cork under his microscope, and he sees all these tiny, empty boxes. They reminded him of the small rooms in a monastery, which were called cells, so that's what he named them. He had no clue he was naming the very foundation of all life. Okay, so let's dig into that cornerstone. What exactly is a cell, and what are the rules that govern our whole understanding of it? Here's the modern definition, and a couple of words here are absolutely key: structural and functional. See, cells aren't just the bricks that build you. They're also the little machines inside the building doing all the work, all the processes needed for life. It's the smallest possible thing that we can look at and say, yep, that's alive. So, building on Hooke's work, other scientists eventually came up with what we call the cell theory. It's really just three simple but huge ideas. 1, if it's alive, it's made of cells. 2, the cell is the most basic, fundamental unit of that life. And 3, this is the one that'll bend your brain a bit, cells don't just pop out of nowhere. Every single cell comes from another cell, which means the cells in your body right now have a direct, unbroken lineage stretching back billions of years. Wild, right? Now that we've got a handle on what a cell is, let's step inside. It turns out that over billions of years, life has really only come up with 2 major architectural plans for these building blocks. So no matter how different they look, every single cell on Earth starts with this basic toolkit. You've got the cell membrane. Think of it as a bouncer at a club controlling what gets in and out. Then there's the cytoplasm, which is the jelly-like goo that fills the whole space. And of course, you've got the genetic material, the DNA, the master instructions for everything the cell will ever do. Now, some cells, we call them eukaryotic cells, and they're what we're made of. Take that basic toolkit and build an entire bustling city inside. They have things called organelles, which are like different departments. The nucleus is the head office, keeping the DNA blueprint safe. The mitochondria are the power plants, generating all the energy. And you've got the endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus, that's your assembly line and shipping department right there. And this table really shows you the great divide. On one side, you have the simpler prokaryotes, like bacteria. They're more like open-plan studios. Their DNA just kind of floats around in a region called the nucleoid, and they don't have all those fancy membrane-bound departments. On the other side, you've got the eukaryotes, plants, animals, us, with our highly organized, compartmentalized structure. This split is one of the most fundamental in the entire history of life. Okay, so we've toured the architecture. Now let's see this factory in action. What is a cell actually doing all day, just to stay alive? Well, a cell never really rests. It's a whirlwind of activity. It's constantly running its metabolism, turning food into energy. It's growing, it's fixing itself, it's carefully copying its DNA before it divides. And it's always talking to its neighbors through chemical signals. It's a nonstop 24/7 operation. And one of its most critical jobs is making proteins. Proteins are the little workhorses that do basically everything. The process is pretty slick. First, in transcription, the cell makes a temporary copy of a gene from the DNA blueprint. That copy is called mRNA. Then, in translation, that mRNA message is sent out to a machine called a ribosome, which reads the instructions and builds a protein piece by piece. It's a flawless system for turning a plan into a product. Now, just to give you a sense of scale, that entire protein-making process we just described, it's happening right now across an estimated 30 trillion cells in your body. Every single one is a tiny, coordinated factory, all working together to keep you going. The numbers are just mind-boggling. So we have these incredible little machines, but they're not all the same. It's time to zoom back out and just appreciate the sheer variety of forms they take and the different ways they live. In life, you've basically got 2 main strategies. There's the unicellular approach. Think of it as being a lone wolf.
Organisms like bacteria are just one cell that has to do everything for itself. Then you have the multicellular strategy. That's us. We're all about teamwork. Our cells specialize. A nerve cell has a totally different job from a muscle cell, but they cooperate in a huge society to build tissues, organs, and, well, you. And even within the complex world of eukaryotes, there's amazing diversity. Plant cells, for instance, need to be sturdy, so they build a rigid cell wall and have chloroplasts to make their own food from sunlight. Fungal cells also have a cell wall, but theirs is made of a tough material called chitin. And animal cells? We need to move around, so we skip the rigid wall and stick with a more flexible membrane.
This chart really drives home the difference in scale. I mean, look how tiny a typical prokaryote is compared to its eukaryotic cousins. An animal cell can be 10 times bigger, and some plant cells can be 50 times bigger. And all that extra real estate is what allows for the amazing internal complexity we were just talking about. So after all this microscopic detail, we get to the big question. Why does any of this matter? Well, because understanding the cell isn't just some academic exercise. It's fundamental to how we understand our health, our diseases, and life itself. Seriously, just think about it. You can't grasp genetics if you don't know how DNA is packed into a nucleus. You can't fight diseases like cancer without understanding what happens when cell division goes wrong. Entire fields like biotechnology, which give us new medicines, are built on our ability to work with cells. It's the bedrock of modern biology. And you know, we didn't figure this all out overnight. Our understanding has been this incredible journey. From Hooke's first peek in 1665, to finally getting the cell theory down, to inventing the electron microscope that let us see the tiny organelles inside. Every breakthrough has peeled back another layer, revealing a world more complex than we ever imagined. So at the end of the day, that's the real takeaway. The cell is where the story of life begins. It doesn't matter if it's a lone bacterium or one of the trillions of cooperating units in a giant sequoia tree. It all starts with this one fundamental, incredible blueprint. And that brings us to a final thought, looking toward the future. We've gone from just observing cells to actually being able to engineer them. As that power grows, we're faced with a pretty profound question. Where do we draw the line between using this knowledge to cure a disease and using it to enhance ourselves? That's a question we're all going to have to think about.